Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate your attendance because we're all, the four of us are all passionate, really, and we're just so excited about sharing our experience and ideas with you today. And thank you, Craig. I couldn't ask for a better introduction, really, to what I would like to share with everyone. And you obviously don't touch this table. Life is full of learnings, isn't it? I don't know if you're aware, but today is National Tree Day. And if I wasn't here, I'd be planting trees. The environment is absolutely a passion to me. And whenever I get the chance with children, that's what I'm sneaking in, environmental awareness. And just last month in June, I actually went through a tour of the Red Centre. And one of the things lots of things took my breath away, but nature constantly dazzled me. And one of the things I was in awe of was how these trees in this extraordinarily inhospitable environment managed to even grow, let alone survive. I mean, look at this. And I love quotes. I so enjoyed your quotes, Craig. I've got I'm so old-fashioned, I write them down by hand. I've got a file that's like this at home. And one of my favourite quotes is from Hodding Carter, and there are only two lasting bequests that we can really hope to give our children. And one of these is roots and the other wings. So that has hugely informed my work because when you think about it, and there's so many corny old sayings. I mean, you can see how old I am. I've decided to go grey. And my parents were British, and they were wordsmiths. And I grew up on, lots of quotes, lots of wonderful words. Scrabble was our favourite game. But, things that we hear, but even the concept of finding your feet. And that is so important. And so whenever I start a class, that's what I do with children. They take off their shoes, and as they get older, I've just been last week working with secondary students, and it sort of makes me smile how awkward they feel when they take their shoes off. But I sort of strongly invite them to. But so actually, when you think of holistic awareness, we need to actually, one of Rick Hanson's terms, I've done some training with Rick Hanson, is to wake down, to actually remember that our head is connected to a body and that our body are connected to our feet. And so I actually make a lot of focus on that right from the beginning of establishing holistic awareness with children from the ground up, really getting them connected to the very soles of their feet. And that's really helpful because it's a long way away from where the action is. This is where the action is. This is where the busyness is. But, so I'm just going to give you a kind of cook's tour with my slides and what I can share with you verbally of my approach. And here's an interesting quote, that time is not a line, and there's another, idea that we have in our head, and timelines, which makes me feel stressed immediately. But then it's actually a series of now points. And apparently, if we take 8 hours of sleeping out of our day, we've got 57,000 seconds. So every one of those seconds is actually a now point. So I have to remember this myself, that we can take a moment to find our feet and refocus and, like the computer, refresh, reset. And that is, an amazingly effective life skill. So even the way, and it was so wonderful to hear what Craig was talking about, because we box things, don't we? We sort of contain knowledge and wisdom, and then things aren't possible. But actually opening our minds to possibility really changes the way we approach life and the attitudes that we have. And so, there's different levels to the idea of holistic. I mean, I'm wanting to share creative, often play-based approaches to mindfulness for children, but it doesn't stop there. I also, when I actually get to offer professional development for teachers in schools, I don't want them to contain the idea of mindfulness either. I'm thrilled if they commit to timetabling, finding a time in the week that's going to be the mindfulness time, but that's not what I'm aiming for them to discover. I want them to have a sense of the school holistically becoming awake, kind, connected. And that includes, and this is, and I work with a growing number of schools, and I'm humbled by what I find sometimes. And this is a school where the principal and the deputy, and I've seen this in other schools, without fail, doesn't matter how busy they are, doesn't matter what's happening in the day, what the weather's like, they're out there every morning shaking hands, looking at children in the eye. They know their names, they know how they went in the footy game. So every child walks into this school feeling that they matter. And that's beautiful. And then they're out there at the end of the day farewelling them. So you see what a safe, heartful container that creates? So mindfulness is not boxed, it's a way of being. Shakespeare, to be or not to be mindful. So then when the children go, this is another school, when the children go into the class, because I'm waiting around often while they go through the formalities of roll call, and it breaks my heart in some schools, and teachers, you see, the essential word really to remember about mindfulness is just one word. It's to remember. And we can think of many aspects of remembering where our attention is. But and there are so many wonderful definitions, probably the most famous is John Kabat-Zinn's, you probably all know that one, but that doesn't really mean much to children, that definition. So I've been crafting with children my simple definition, and this is just what it is at the moment, because it evolves, but it's just pausing to remember what matters now. Because if we did that throughout the day, when we're in a conundrum, when we're feeling a bit discombobulated, I love that word, we can pause and remember what really matters now. Where does my attention need to be? So when they take the role, remembering to look at children, to smile at them, because that immediately touches their hearts. So it's not just this, if you think about the possibilities of mindfulness, it's not just the practices. They're wonderful and they're very important, but it's about the whole and the ongoing cultivation of a kind awareness. And so basically this is what we're talking about. And again, when I do PD sessions with teachers, and of course they want, a lot of them just want tick the box. I understand they're overworked and they're time poor and they're under incredible pressure. So they would actually like me to give them a formula, but I'm afraid I disappoint them because I actually don't, it isn't really a formula. And so basically it's moment by moment, and this is the thing, when you begin to be curious about how the mind works, about how it evolves, about what's happening in the mind, it is a constant dosage that's needed. It's not just one timetable lesson a week. That's wonderful, that's a great start. But it's a drip feed. It is holistic education. And I have to wear a very big watch because this is such a huge topic. And I don't know that I'll do it justice because we've got morning tea coming up. So I'll do my best because I could go down rabbit holes of talking about this area or that area. But one thing that strikes me, and I'm very aware that now for everybody, there are all these apps. And a huge number of people are using them. And I don't want to say anything negative about apps. But the problem for some people is out of the blue, here they are, the teacher puts on an app. How does that land? how does it actually connect to the heart? But not just the heart, how does it connect to the head? So the thing to be mindful of with practices is that preparation is needed. Because I've found from years of experience that just going in full of enthusiasm and sharing practices can be absolutely uncomfortable and meaningless for adults or children. So it's more than just formal or, and what I love mindfulness practices. I've been meditating for 4 decades on and off in various, traditions and wisdoms and what have you. So I'm going to sort of share a bit of an overview, and one of Craig's last points, which is so close to my heart, that education actually is all about drawing out. It's not prescription. It isn't education if it's just, prescribing. And we have to be wary of that with meditation. These one-size-fits-all kind of approaches, because it never is. I'm constantly astounded with any group of children that I meet, how with the best of my intentions, with my very well-prepared lessons, it's not going to satisfy, it's not just, some of them will just be unmoved. I can guarantee that. So really, whenever I teach meditation, mindfulness to children on a treasure hunt, and when I see kids privately, because I do sometimes, and I insist on meeting the parents first, because I want to find out their beliefs and their mindset and a bit of the potted history of why that child is coming to me. And often the parents say, Johnny needs to control himself. And I say, well, you're coming to the wrong person. I'm not going to teach him to control himself. And so I say to them, I'm going to be on a treasure hunt. And so it's actually looking for clues from the children as to what's going to engage them, what's going to light a pilot light, what's going to be meaningful. So, and essentially, there's a palette of possibilities. And when you think, and if I had a whiteboard here, I'd be drawing. When I work with children, I don't use PowerPoint unless I'm presenting to 200, which is usually secondary students, and that has a purpose. I did that last week twice. I presented to 200 kids, and then we had breakout sessions where they had tasters of practices. But there's a palette of possibilities for mindful education. And obviously, and I'm going to kind of whip through some of them in this presentation. And this is one of the most, who in this room has a never-ending pile of books to read in this area? And as soon as the pile gets down, there's another one. So it's wonderful, isn't it? There's no end to this discovery and end to this journey. My daughters disparagingly say to me, Mum, when are you going to read a novel? And I do, actually. I've joined a book club. So there's 2 piles now. But this is the latest. Has anyone heard of this book? This is a neuroscientist from Melbourne University. It was a wonderful read for me. And Stop Talking, Start Influencing. And he actually says, and I've been aware of this, there are more than 5 senses. I don't know if you've ever wondered about that. But the kids have taught me, I've actually put, what I do, really, a lot of what I'm doing is actually inquiry-based. I'm asking them questions. And they're actually carrying the class, with their input and their involvement, because that brings it to life. They're engaged. They're not passively listening to me. It's actually their lesson. But he says we've got 17. And I won't read them out now, but if you come to my workshop, we'll be looking at that list. But just off the top of your head, would you like to tell me any that come to your mind beyond the obvious 5? Intuition. Yeah, there we are. Intuition. Anything else? Yes, there's another one. And on it goes, even a sense of whether you're thirsty, whether you're tired, of how you're moving. Are you moving slowly or quickly? I mean, so there's this amazing palette of ways to, and when you think in any given class of children, any group of children, you have a range. You have some more auditory, some more visual, some more kinesthetic, not to mention the ones that, and there's always one, I find, who's been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, whose parents are divorcing. That's almost a given, who's going through emotional turmoil. So it is never one size fits all, and it behoves anyone who has I feel like it's an incredible privilege to have this opportunity to be with these children, to be very mindful, to be learning from them. Not just have your great lesson and they're lucky enough to have you bestow it on them, but it's a shared experience. It's a dynamic experience. And the picture I'm going to show you now always makes me laugh because I'm using this, it's in my second book, I'm using this practice a lot. And look at this picture. And now where's the pointer? Look at this one. And look at the contrast there of this darling little thing and this dear little fellow. And this is what I find. And I expect that. I do not expect compliance or, that they're all going to think, oh, this is wonderful. And this is actually, this is interesting because a lot of mindfulness programs for children, but also for adults, they say the core practice is, you tell me, what's the core practice? Because it's in a lot of programs that I've looked at and, it's common knowledge. What's the core practice of mindfulness, do you think? Well, awareness, yes, but then what are you practicing? Where do you take your attention to practice? The breath, belly breathing. Do you think that all children are warm to that? Believe me, I actually saw a beautiful 11-year-old boy 2 weeks ago. He's the son of a dear friend. And he's very intelligent, very insightful, and we made sense of it first. And then I said, now we're going to do some practices. And he put up his hand like this and he said, no breathing practices. and I could, you see, here I could talk about that, but if you've read any books like Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score, if anybody has had experienced trauma or extreme illness or maybe even asthma, you don't take them to the core of the body. And you've got to realise that with children. And for some children, breathing is not that interesting. Really, just to stand there and breathe doesn't do it for them. So you need to keep this inquiry. And you see, if mindfulness is being curious, having an inquiry-based frame of mind. And so it's never, you've got to be open to picking up where kids are at and what is lighting up their pilot lights, and beginning to give them this palette of opportunities, of noticing, of really being in touch of their shape, what shape they're in. I use language like this, what shape are you in? And then what state are you in? And realising the two go hand in hand, that if you actually change the shape, you actually really start to notice different states happening. And this is kind of a palette of learning to actually, and I actually, it's sort of been a realisation to me, because we put this credence on this idea of self-knowledge, and there's wonderful quotes about that. But to me, it's not about self-knowledge, because that can become old hat. Because aren't we all evolving? Hopefully we are. It's actually knowing it's a dynamic, it's not a fixed thing. So it's knowing and being in touch and connected to what's going on underneath our head and in our heart. And, these beautiful, and actually someone over there said proprioception. That is my core practice. It's actually for children and actually adults, when I work with adults too. As Rick Hansen said, waking down being aware of the shape you're in and noticing the subtle choices we can make to feel more stable, more balanced, more actually comfortable in this container of our body. And there's no limit to the practices here. So, I mean, I continue to go to yoga classes and study yoga. I'm learning Qigong. I've done some Feldenkrais workshops. I dance. I do Nia every week. Has anyone heard of Nia? I just love it. So I dance with the children too. So I want them to actually wake down and feel their body, know the changing kind of weather in their body, and realise that there's always choices. There's always, you know, these wonderful opportunities. And even having play-based. So, you know, and actually so for me, the breath awareness is secondary. I gradually move them in. We actually, I mean, obviously when you stretch, it's changing the way you breathe. So these kids are experiencing what it feels like to be stuck in a hula hoop, you see, with constrained space. So having a play-based approach makes it fun. I mean, and you know, children are far more engaged if they're having a good time. So there's all these opportunities for novelty, for creativity, you know, for a total range of experiences, and that's one of them. And this is what I did last December. I actually participated as a volunteer. Have you heard of the Sony camps? Absolutely amazing. They actually give parents with high needs, special needs children respite for a few days, and it's all mainly volunteers. And they actually have senior students giving up their time and, you know, supporting. So this is what we were doing here, and the children loved it, to my joy, because you never know, really. So we're actually bringing awareness to the breath with that piece of material. So we're making breathing clouds over them, which fortunately worked. So you've always got to go like a bit of an adventure. Believe me, sometimes my heart's been in my mouth. I've actually worked with mute autistic children, and my heart was in my mouth because I just wasn't quite sure. It was a total learning for me. But, you know, amazing discoveries with this palette of possibilities there. So it's really important to, I think, when you're working with children, to have that, you know, to have that adventurous spirit and to realise that you are being informed constantly by where they're at and what is lighting them up. And so then we can go to the palette of the topics, and that is enormous. Because this is my 11th year with Geelong Grammar, and the expectation is I write a new course every year. I've written my 11th course this year. And so the thing is, and I think this is really important, that if we want children to embrace mindfulness and we would love them to practice, preparation is necessary. Preparation to actually meet, to sort of connect to their head so it makes sense, that they can see the logic, they can see the relevance, and then that they can feel the joy and feel the benefits. Then they'll be committed. They'll want to practice. And I can't begin in the time I've got to share all those topics, but I'm just going to show you a couple here. When you think about life over the ages, stories have always been there. Myths, fables, stories. Children love stories. That book that I showed you before has got a whole section on the importance of using stories. And this year at Geelong Grammar, I'm actually using Alice in Wonderland. And it is so rich. I mean, it starts with rabbit holes. and every character that she encounters, all quite insane, which is pretty close to life sometimes, but they have extraordinary quotes. Have a look at the quotes from Alice in Wonderland. Do you know the Mad Hatter says to Alice? I mean, I just blown away. And they love, because it's the Mad Hatter's quote, you know, quite frankly, if I used Dalai Lama quotes with children, wouldn't necessarily land, but the Mad Hatter does. And the Mad Hatter says to Alice, I just love this quote, he says, you know what the issue is with people in this world, Alice? And he said, everybody wants a magical solution to their problems, but no one believes in magic. So I'm having a ball doing Alice in Wonderland, and it's like an iceberg. There's so much to that story. It's just a ripper. I mean, it's totally extraordinary, but it's rich. And I use a lot of old classics like the Yellow Brick Road is all that's coming to mind at the moment, The Wizard of Oz, but they know those classics, and the Magic Faraway Tree, and they're full of rich metaphors, and so really, when I do that, I'm asking them questions. I'm not telling them anything. I might read snippets of stories, but they know the stories often if they're those kind of stories. And then too, my last year's Geelong Grammar course was actually a journey through the body. And that was fabulous too. So we started with musculoskeletal, and I brought in skeletons and, did experiences of muscles and worked them through the main systems, ending up with cells. Cells. I mean, gosh, when you start looking at the life of our cells, it's like going into space discoveries. So you see, you can actually get excited about writing your own program. I mean, you can read and you could look at mine, but I've said in both my books they're descriptive, they're not prescriptive, because it's really important to have your authentic way, your own relationship with children, and craft it yourself, obviously with wisdom and background, but, enjoying yourself. And this is a totally new foray for me. With my involvement with Confluence, I'm actually working with a doctor of philosophy and a priest to actually explore devising, we're doing pilot programs in 2 schools, a spiritual, at the moment in the Christian tradition, but we don't intend it to stay there. And this was a class with an adorable group of children from Collingwood, and this school's opposite, the high-rise commission flats. Most of these children are refugees. And the school asked me to do a class on Mother Mary. Fortunately, I have a Catholic sister-in-law, so she gave me icons, which they loved. So what the children were doing here, and this speaks to what you were talking about, Craig, they told me the qualities of Mother Mary. And so they filled up that space. It's all their words. And that's what 1-2K, and look at I don't know if you can read this, but they've actually got yes there. I'm just always enthralled. I can't wait to hear what's going on in their minds. And then with that kind of list of qualities, love, kind, respectful of everyone, wonderful, hopeful of grace, then they took those qualities into their sitting meditation. So you see, they'd actually devised their own meditation there. So there's just this incredible potential for them to have agency, for them to be part of this process of discovery. And then, of course, being an old art teacher, drawing is one of the props that I use. And what that particular drawing is, and so I always carry a bag of crayons and pencils just in case something comes to mind. The children had actually just been dancing, and we're learning about cells. So that is a drawing of that child's, what he imagined his cells would look like. And then and the thing is, that I find a lot of modern children are a bit resistant to stillness. It's not comfortable initially, but you can slide them in, and you can use movements, slow movements like Qigong, to kind of get them into that kind of slowing down the heartbeat and the breathing without them knowing, and then slide that into stillness. And this is just an off-the-cuff little practice that I did, and I was hoping to do this as a practice, Paul, but I can see I'm running out of time. Well, I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to, look, a snap, a speed dating mindfulness practice. Just put your notes down and just lean back in your chair Because this is what these children, this is the beginning of the lesson. And they just sat down and I just put this music on and I said, and just one hand on your heart, one hand on your tummy. And all I said was, we're going to notice the music with our ears, but it's more than that. We're going to feel the music and we're going to be curious to see what happens in our bodies with this music. And then we can be curious if anything comes, like colours or shapes. So that's what I said. You might like to close your eyes if that's okay with you. And this is the music I played. And I'd love to know what you experienced. Maybe you could tell me at morning tea. But I'm constantly, they take my breath away, really they do. And this dear little boy, William, he was in year 2, you just never forget these experiences. He was so enthralled to tell what he'd experienced that his bottom levitated. He was sitting. This happens quite a bit. He was sitting and he just rose to his knees and started explaining the vision, and this is the vision. And we didn't have time to draw it. I said, please, could you draw that for me? And he did. And this is his drawing. And he was walking through a maze of flats. So that says start there, and there's the finish. So this, you see, is how rich this work can be. And then before you know it, they don't need you to guide their meditation. You're just a shepherd, really. That's all you are. It's their meditation. So it becomes, and props, nature is free. And they need to remember it exists. I'm just broken-hearted by what we're doing with housing where I live. Because, every day another beautiful old house is gone and they just dig the guts out of the land and build a concrete monster, and there's not even any grass for these children in these houses. So, and look, before you know it, they're meditating. He's smelling a cinnamon stick, so herbs, cinnamon sticks, flowers, and then bringing me every day, there's a kitchen sponge in a bowl of water, and we're talking about the heart. And that was so if you use everyday things, they connect to them and they remember them, because every time they see the kitchen sponge, they'll think of hearts. And then my dog. I worked for 6 years at Montague's special school and I found it increasingly difficult. I ended up with a whole class of boys, and I'd walk in and they'd all be lying down on the floor with their ears tuned into their device. To actually get them up was a challenge. And I tried this and then I took my dog in, neurotic Jack Russell, and it was magic. Look how close to me they are, hanging on every word. It changed my whole year with them. So, you sometimes have to, and then, feathers with year 11s. So just simple things can really create, and then, ultimately what you wish for is that children will find this state of ease and comfort in their own body. I just love that photo, and that it transcends differences, and that it's not at all narcissistic. It's actually teaching them to befriend themselves, to befriend others, to see beyond any differences, and bond. And I'm flicking through, and I love that. That's my daughter's hands. And, a fig is a fruit that flowers inside. And that's what you want them to discover, their worth, their goodness, their inner flowering. And because I'm very concerned about the environment, apparently if we planted over 1 trillion trees, it would really help with global warming. But it sort of gives me hope, the spread of mindful education, because if we could start having millions of children being kinder and more aware and awake, that would really mean the world's in better hands. And I better finish there so you can enjoy your morning tea. Thank you very much.